Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Sensitive Stability BPD live show. We have to go over some topics that are similar sometimes because they're so important in the BPD community. Not everything is completely nuanced or super defined. Some things are just living life, right? Living everyday life. And today we are going to be talking about BPD and relationships. Specifically, I want to go over the idea of how we make relationships work with a neurotypical person, right? Somebody who is living within the social norms confines. And what I mean when I say social norm confines is what the mass majority of the world chooses to do, believe in, or their opinion. Now, that's not always the right thing, right? It's not always the right thing. Everything's a scale in life, and there's going to be some times throughout the course of living of which sometimes outside social norm is actually the way that the world needs to move. Good morning, everybody. I see all of you in here. I see all of our regulars and love you all. So glad you're here. What I mean is an example, just to give you an example. Let's say the gay or trans stigma, right? We're trying to normalize that. We're trying to make that something that is accepted, something by society. And we're trying to take some of the outside that was looked at as deviant and we're trying to put it inside the social norm category. That's an example of there's some stuff that needs to be normalized in the world in general. That's not related to BPD, but this is a mission for us to, I don't want to say fit in because that's not really the objective, but get along with the outside world, right? And especially our partners, because our partners don't think like us. Our partners without borderline personality disorder do not think like a borderline personality disorder person. And as you may be aware at this point, if you have this condition, we've spent a lot of our lives trying to convince them or help them understand us. There's a whole lot of, you don't understand, you'll never understand. And I say this all the time, they're not going to understand. Your neurotypical partner is never fully going to get that cannonball hole in the chest. They're not going to get that part. They're not going to get the pain or the suffering as you experience it, if that makes sense. And that creates frustration for us. And that is a large root. There are many roots, but this is a large root of the issue when we talk about how do we fit into a neurotypical relationship, because you fall in love with anybody, right? Not just anybody, but you never know who you're going to fall in love with. And when you do, you obviously want the best chance of making it work. So the mission, the topic for today is surrounding the idea of how do we coexist with the rest of the world. It's not just romantic relationships we're talking about here. It's every type of relationship. You want to have a best friend. You start becoming friends with someone who does not have BPD. We need skills to be able to make sure that our interactions with that person go smoothly. And we need to make sure that if we have a relationship and we're going to raise kids or start a life with someone who does not have BPD, what does that look like? How do we make sure that goes smoothly? We have family members who are in our lives permanently in a lot of cases, and they don't understand sometimes, right? They're looking at us like, why is he so turbulent? Why is he so crazy? And one thing I want to touch base on here, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the live. If you're new here, we're a very loving, supporting community. Everybody here, man, some of the stuff going on, I can't yet reveal. There's a really cool announcement coming next week. I don't want to drop it here right now, but it warms my heart to see how involved everybody is and how much everyone cares, how helpful everybody is, how supportive everybody is. That is rare in life in general, but it's very hard for us with BPD because we're often looked at as the black sheep, so to speak. I've literally been called the black sheep. Morning, Liz. Liz says, so how would a BPD, and I like the miss part, Miss Liz, perfect. So how would a BPD individual figure out what social norm is meant to be? This is something that we learn over the course of time to some extent, because you can't be expected to absorb an entire encyclopedia just by looking at it. You actually have to flip through every page, right? So similarly, if we're talking about social norm, there are a million mini scales, just a million mini scales. There's how you behave in a movie theater. That's a super specific thing, right? BPD people might have one idea of what that looks like or what's okay. Social norm has a different idea. I'm not saying that we all have some weird divergent behavior in movie theaters. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is most people, even BPD people, have an idea of what it's like to be in a movie theater. You're supposed to be quiet, right? We pretty much understand that our BPD doesn't disrupt that social norm confine. But this is a great example. So there are topics, usually they're very emotional for us, of which we don't understand social norm. For example, the topic of cheating. This one's highly emotional. For a BPD person like myself, when I go back and I look before remission, before I could understand these kinds of concepts, I used to think that cheating was my wife looks at another guy who's an actor in a movie. Like, what is she going to watch a movie and every time there's a male on the scene, she's just going to turn her head? That's not going to work. If you look at it and say, what do most social norm people think that cheating is? They think cheating is intimacy, right? Like romantic intimacy, that mostly of any kind in many cases. Flirting is sometimes, in social norm, there's still a scale. Some people think that light flirting is not cheating. Some people think that light flirting is definitely cheating. Now, there are neurotypical people that are on either side of that scale. We fall outside of the scale and we think it's definitely cheating. You know what I mean? Definitely, but to an extreme. So I'm not saying that you have to have no boundaries. I'm not saying that you have to just get walked all over. I'm not saying that you have to lower your standards. But what I am saying is if you want that relationship to work, then it's important that you understand where your partner is and what their definition of cheating is. Then you have to figure out, am I okay with that? Right. And if I'm not okay with that, you have to ask yourself, should I be okay with that? And you have to look at the outside world and you have to say, how many people, it's almost like polling somebody of the world, how many people would be okay with this and how many people would not be okay with this? And is this something that I can budge on? Because if I budge on it a little bit, then we can close that gap because our core values are obviously different. You think that cheating is only physical intimacy. I think that cheating is anytime you look at another guy. That's never going to work, man. That they're too far apart. They're always going to be conflict all the time, right? We have to close the gap if we want it to work, okay? If you love them and you want it to work, you'll say, okay, fine. I'm not going to really worry that much if my partner glances at someone who's they're attracted, they're not attracted to them, but somebody that I perceive could be a romantic threat. So I'll move this way a little bit. They're going to say, okay, this really bothers my partner. This is when a relationship's really good and you're working together. This person will say, the neurotypical person might say, okay, it bothers my partner if I touch another guy's arm when I'm talking to him, right? So I'll not do that anymore. They move a little bit. You see what I'm saying? We close the gap a little bit, make it a little bit better, a little bit more manageable, a little bit less chaotic, because we don't want to just be flipping tables upside down on the weekend because of something that was ultimately very silly. And I will say that I do say this all the time here, and you guys probably have heard me say this before many times, whether in coaching in private or here in live, but anytime I start getting upset these days, anytime, if I get even a little bit upset about anything, it doesn't have to be with my partner, it could be with any other person. It's usually some other people that are involved, because if I was on an island by myself, let's admit, I wouldn't have any of these problems, right? That's the cure to BPD. Ultimately, if you don't want to do any work and you want an instantaneous overnight cure, pluck yourself out of the world, drop yourself on a tiny little island by yourself, and boom, right? Problem solved. There's no people to instigate you, right? But they're instigating you for things that most of the time we need to change a little bit. It's us that needs to change sometimes, right? Most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. Anyway, the phrase is this: whenever you get upset, you ask yourself, am I going to care about this a year from now? Like, seriously, am I going to care about the fact that I'm feeling underappreciated because I did the dishes and didn't get noticed? Is that going to bother me in a year? Am I even going to remember that? If the answer is no, then you don't have a problem. And there's no point in wasting any more energy on that because you've already committed to the concept that a few days from now, you're not even going to remember it. So why waste energy feeling upset about it today? That's nonsensical. It's not a problem. And deeply conflicted, I'm going to email you back. I did read your email this morning, and we're going to be able to work something out great. So I will shoot you an email back with some more details later today, and we'll work that out. Excuse me, but good morning, everybody. Anybody who's joined since they've been listening to my spiel. If you have any comments or questions, or at any point in time you'd like to be invited onto the live to speak for a few minutes with me or ask any questions or whatever, or speak to the community, that's also okay, by the way, because we're a family. We're all here every single day, right? So feel free to reach out to David Keck in the chat. He is our moderator, and he is a sensitive stability coach, and he is amazing, okay? So he'll make sure that you get seen and heard, and that's important because I struggle to keep an eye on the chat while I'm sitting here running my mouth, right? The message has to be received. Going back to that social norm situation, I think that we struggle a lot of the times to see social norm because we are terrified. It is fear. And you guys also hear me all the time say that the greatest things in life are on the other side of terror. It is entirely true in my growth process, okay? In the process where I have gone from total wreck to completely cured, I went through a number of perspective changes. These perspective changes were epiphany based. So I would all of a sudden realize, oh man, why was I thinking that way? What was it that made me think this way my whole life? Right? And as I hit these little marks, it's all the things I was worried about up until that point that had to do with that topic. It wasn't even worth me worrying about. And I had wasted all this time. The reason I'm telling you guys this is because to make relationships work, to have social interactions with the outside world, people who do not have borderline personality disorder, it requires flexibility. It requires versatility. And it is gonna be scary, but there's not one time where my fear was logical after I got over it. After I got over it, I'm like, I really wasted years of my life worrying about my partner cheating, for example. I really wasted years of my life worried about each friendship I had and if they were going to abandon me because they didn't respond fast enough, let's say, for instance. If I look back, I'm like, all that fear I had, not only did it prevent me from focusing in the right sense on the things that matter the most, okay, but it also was contributing to a self-fulfilling prophecy. You see, all the fear you're feeling, it manifests the fear. It makes it more likely to happen. But when you stop fearing a lot of this stuff and you back off, because we don't have control over other people, let's be honest about that. You cannot change other people. You could try, and they might fake it for a little while, but they're going to resent you for it. It's going to come back tenfold. It's going to backfire. It is not going to be cool down the road. You can only control somebody for so long before it backfires. I know this all too well. I spent the entire duration of my first marriage trying to intensely control my ex-wife. I was terrified she was going to cheat on me. And I did everything that I could to try to prevent that from happening. I tried to control what she wore. I tried to control who she talked to. I tried to control where she went. I tried to control whether she had a job or not. It's over and over again in my life. And it was a fearful life. The whole relationship, I look back, I was just a total nervous wreck, right? What ended up happening in that relationship? You skip ahead to the last couple of years, she ended up doing this whole I want to be a famous Instagram model thing, right? ends up going over to all these dudes' houses, these shady situations, taking sexy photo shoots in their little private makeshift photo rooms in their house, the whole thing. Looking for that online attention, getting the likes from all these guys. My worst nightmare. I wasn't even on social media. I didn't want to be on social media. I only got on social media way later. And it was mostly just to connect with old friends at that point. I saw the value of it as I started to mature. I avoided it because it was another example of something I was terrified of. And I knew that she was on there. I didn't want to see. I don't want to see what's going on. She tried to show me her photos. I'm like, God, get out of here with that. Eventually, I realized, all right, I got to embrace this or she's going to leave. Just turns out it was an awful relationship. We should have called that one quits early. I could identify that at this point. We weren't a good fit. But then I see other relationships where they were better matches. And they, like my wife, Carolyn, is phenomenal. She's phenomenal. I would do anything for her. She would do anything for me. And the love is very real. But I can see how I could ruin even that. If I had the same mentality and I control every aspect of her, she's not going to stick around. She's not going to stay. Okay. People can only tolerate that, but for so long. And it's a tough world for us. It's a tough world for everybody. But then the borderline paranoia and the contributions, the heavy contributions that we make as BPD people towards ruining a relationship without us even realizing we're doing it, it's phenomenally heavy in weight, phenomenally large. And that breaks my heart because we don't know that we're contributing to the demise. We don't seem to be able to stop it pre-remission because we're not aware. We're not even aware we're doing it. And then the worst part of all, we're feeling this fear and dread the entire time. My memories from that entire relationship are fear, massive anxiety, feeling disrespected, unappreciated, unheard, lots and lots of bad memories, more episodes than I can count. And I look back at that and I'm just like, man, did I waste time? Yes, absolutely. Yes, Greenbird. Let me go ahead and invite you on and you can share a little bit. How are you this morning?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I finally got some rest.
You
So I
look
feel,
good. You look like you got some
thank you.
rest.
Yeah, got a nice, good, solid 5.5 hours. But hey, I'll because it's
That's
been
good
a
for you.
rough few days. So hell yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So what would you
Okay.
like to contribute today? I'm into it.
Let's do a little, you know me. Hi, everybody. If you don't know me, I'm a client of Kevin's. I'm also a neuro researcher. And I like to talk about what happens in the brain and what gets us here. I don't have BPD, but I'm married to someone who has BPD, and my mother has BPD. So I've researched this for 20 years. As you're talking about today, the panic that comes when you're not getting the attention that you want from your partner, or when you seem to have misaligned understandings as to what certain things are, certain concepts are with your partner. So you're talking about cheating.
Yep.
And there's a few things that go into this from the borderline perspective, and some of it is not none of it's your fault. None of it is your fault, but there's a lot that goes into making you think that way. So this will
Right.
hopefully help with the self-loathing of, man, why do I think this way? Why am I like
Oh
this?
yeah, this is a good topic.
Um,
Very nice contribution.
yeah, so I'm going to tell you why you're like this. The core wound of BPD, and Kevin knows this. I'm sharing this with everyone. The core wound of borderline is basically trauma and neglect in childhood. There's some genetic components that go into developing borderline. It essentially starts to develop in the anterior insular cortex of your brain. So it's in the back, in the middle, and the really, really protected. And people used to think, well, what if did I drop my kid on their head? That was a legitimate thought. I dropped my
Well,
kid on his
brain
head.
brain damage does contribute to this in some
Yeah,
cases too. So
yeah.
that's there's some truth to that as well. But
It
anyway,
can. It can. But that's fairly rare, right?
yes,
Babies
fairly rare.
bounce. I hate to say it like that, but they do. And The anterior insular cortex is very protected. So even if you did get a brain trauma, if you got a concussion or something, it would have to be pretty severe to affect that portion of your brain. And that's pretty rare. But the thing that does affect it is more in the last 20 years, more so because in our parents' age, the boom, they were lead poisoned, straight up lead poisoned. And that development, but trauma at an early age, between the ages of 5 and 8, usually, stunts the development of that part of your brain. And what that part of your brain controls is your amygdala, so that primitive lizard brain, that fight or flight, and the development of empathy. And when you are lacking those, you have a lot of anxiety that you're prone to for the rest of your life. Now, the good news is those things are fixable.
Yeah.
You can heal those things. But from a psychological perspective, what's happening when you're so hung up and so worried about your partner or so worried about your favorite person, when your life is consumed with what is my favorite person doing? What is this person doing? Why aren't they responding to me in the time that I want? Why aren't they doing why aren't they doing things in a way that I think that they should be done? And that leads to thoughts like, they're doing this to hurt me. They're doing this to upset me. Well, from the non-borderline perspective, they're not thinking about you like that. They're thinking about themselves because they have a strong sense of identity usually. A sense of identity is fairly foreign to people with borderline personality disorder who haven't been in treatment at all. You don't even realize that your identity and well-being is so hung up on other people. But when you have a healthy sense of identity, and it's something you very much do develop when you work with Kevin and when you get into some kind of treatment program, and especially as you just learn about borderline and how it works. A sense of identity allows you to accept that you have no control over the people around you. None. You don't have any control over anything. I was just having a conversation with David last night, and I was joking with him, my kind of motto for life is, okay, fine. Whatever happens, okay, fine. I'll be okay, because I have a sense of identity that tells me I'll be okay. I'm capable. I'm resourceful. I know who I am and what I stand for. And I have that because in early life for me, regardless of a lot of trauma, I did have a strong family unit that let me know you're going to be okay. You have resources. You will learn how to do these things. You have these skills. This is what you do in an emergency situation, and you can't count on other people to be there for you. That happened to me because I'm autistic, and they knew from a very early age I was autistic, and being a strong family unit, they didn't want to worry what would happen to me for my whole life if they weren't around, if something happened to them. So they put a lot of time into making sure I knew build a car, how to build a house, how to do plumbing, how to build a business, how to write a press release. Every person in my family who had niche skills made sure from, the age of 5 on up that I was as good at each of those skills as they were, so that I would be okay. I was ugly when I was a kid. They didn't ever think I would speak. They didn't think I would ever be pretty. They didn't think I would ever have a partner. So I fortunately have a very, very strong upbringing from an early age that created a very strong sense of identity, and it carries you through. So you can learn how to do that when you start learning new skills about that sense of identity. You're going to start seeing that you worry a little less about what other people are doing. And then it's especially helpful when you start getting triggered, you get triggered for something and you realize, oh, you know what? That's what that person does. And what they chose to do actually doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm okay. I'll be okay. I got these things about me that no one can change. I've got these desires and goals that I can keep reaching for without that person if I need to move on without that person. It's just a long road to get there, but I just want to assure everyone that you can. It's neuro reconditioning. You were neuro conditioned to panic when you felt abandoned because that's your core wound. But you can also, as amazing adults, because you're all here, you know that it's just not working out right now, you can learn the other way, and it just takes some practice, and after a while it becomes automatic. Your brain literally starts to rewire yourself, and that's what Kevin's program does. It helps. It's the roadmap. It's the rewiring roadmap. It's the electronic schematic, if you will.
Very well. Very well done. Very well said. That's exactly what happened. People don't realize. I remember the day that I first heard or understood that you could increase gray matter in the brain, and that your brain could actually be changing in real time while you're exploring topics like this. And when you start having these epiphanies, like I could see it on people's faces when they're talking to me, and I experienced this myself on the way to remission. It's like their brain is changing in real time,
That's it. Yep.
directly in front of me, and
Yep.
it's happening in the meeting. And people don't realize that that is a real thing. I think they think that to learn a perspective change takes, a huge amount of time, but in fact, it just takes more of an open mind and the right catalyst. I kind of look at myself as that catalyst.
Yeah, epiphanies. So there are things that happen in your brain when that's going on. You know that feeling you get? It's an epiphany for a reason. It's like like a light, right? For a reason.
Yep.
Neurotransmitters. Okay. In traumatized brains, there's a lot of picture like water hoses hanging out there that are cut off and they're just spouting water, right? But the water's not going anywhere. And in your brain, those are neurotransmitters that are trying to make connections with other neuroreceptors, but they're broken. It's the basis of depression, really, when you SSRIs, subserotonin reuptake inhibitors. What those do is they give your serotonin neurotransmitters just a little oomph to make the connection to the neuroreceptors. But an epiphany is dopamine based. You have dopamine neurotransmitters and neuroreceivers. Dopamine deficiency is the basis of borderline personality disorder. A dopamine deficiency or a regulation issue with dopamine causes those extreme highs, those extreme lows.
I don't know. I mean, I think there's a little bit more to it than just the dopamine deficiencies.
Oh, there's definitely more.
I usually go on the front of, the opioid deficiency is a bit more important from my perspective on that, because it's very pain and suffering based, and that part leads in. But the dopamine thing is also a very real deal with BPD as well. We have those. Actually, we can't get too deep into that topic because we got slapped on the wrist the last time.
Okay.
No, you know what I mean when I'm going in the opioid deficiency category, and why certain things might fill that gap, right, and make that a little better for us, and why we become predisposed to certain types of behaviors and addictions that starts going on. A TikTok knows
an epiphany is a dopamine neuroconnection.
Yes, that's correct, and that's why we brought up the dopamine thing. Correct. Yeah, the epiphany thing is important. Thank you so much for breaking all that down for us. It's always a delight to hear your voice. The community loves getting the science too, and that makes a big difference. So I really appreciate it.
I love you guys. Have a good day. I'll talk to you soon.
Well, we love you too. Thank you very much. David, do you need me to kick you, Greenbird, or? Okay. I know some people can't find the disconnect button. I don't know where it is because I've never actually been a guest on a live before. I've only just hosted. Here we go. Good morning, Liz. How are you?
Hi. It's night time here.
But
I'm
you're in
good.
Australia,
How are you?
for those who don't know. I'm good. Finally got my sleep. I feel great.
That's excellent. You needed it.
Yes, no doubt about that. But no rest for the wicked, or the hardworking and determined, right?
Apparently.
I've always been that way.
Yeah, but you do need sleep.
For sure.
So the question that I had, and I mentioned it in the comment, so I wasn't sure what the social norm or reality for neurotypical individuals was when, like, relating to what you expect in a relationship. Like, for example, talking regularly throughout the day, so including good morning and good night messages, just how clingy a person with BPD can actually be. So where would kind of draw the line? I think it's more of a individual conversation where you'd have to have that conversation with your partner, but like partners, the conversations can go completely. They could say that it's all right and it'd be too much. So how do you know when it's too much and what the social norm actually is?
Well, great question, and it's actually very loaded in the fact that there's a lot of ways to go with it. You're right that it is subjective, and it also is very dependent on each independent relationship. So what you and because all the neurotypical people out there in the world, they're also on different parts of the social norm scale. Not everybody is here, all over here, or right in the middle. They're everywhere. And this scale exists for a million different topics. One of the topics you listed, how fast to respond, people talking all throughout the day, that kind of thing, right? That's a scale right there. Some
Yeah.
people are going to be on the I'm going to keep up with you side. Some people are going to be on the I don't like to talk that much side. Some people don't like to text at all, for example, if it's texting. Other people, they an intensity that match our intensity. Now, one of our problems here comes into play when we have things like the honeymoon period, because things are so exciting that a neurotypical person will have a boost in energy. They'll match our
Exactly.
intensity right away, which
Yeah.
creates a crash for us when the honeymoon period dies and we see their messages decline, and of course we're still right on top. So
Like, what have we done?
that's when the social
Yeah.
norm scale is we're outside of it, and that's when it breaks a little bit. The neurotypical person will match our intensity because it's social norm. When you have all that dopamine and oxytocin from a new relationship, that's a social norm. They'll be more excited, more intense. Most people are like that, but then most people also kind of normalize conversation a little bit, start to get into a routine that isn't as exciting, but the love changes. And that's the part, for example, this might help a little bit with this question, or the answer rather. We have to look at we have to have a perspective change in terms of what real love actually is, because we are relying on kind of playing off of what Greenberg said a little bit. It's very relevant. At first, Greenberg, when you said I want to talk about self-identity, I was thinking, well, that's not the topic here, so let's try to keep it a little brief. But then you curved it into the topic very nicely and made it relate and helped explain a lot of it. The idea here of self-identity and us not knowing who we are and not really liking a lot of things about us means that we're falling onto other people for that validation. That matters, because in the beginning of the relationship, they're all about us, all for us, just like we're all about them, all for them. So we're getting that external validation so frequently that we feel great in the honeymoon period. Everything's great. And that's why later in the relationship, when things start to normalize, we're like feeling terrible. Oh, you used to do this. You used to say that. You used to love me more. Why don't you do this anymore? Why don't you do that anymore? Well, everybody levels out except for us. We have to change our idea about love. We have to say, it's great that the honeymoon period's there. Make all those memories, bond, make it cool, have a great that's awesome. But real love, it transmutes into a different type of substance as the relationship matures and ages. And if you understand that over time, I don't think that it's something that you could easily explain in a couple minutes, for example. But if you start to understand that real love is much deeper than attention, that's one of the keys, because we thrive on that attention early on, and then when we're not getting later, that's the problem. So I think that kind of, does that sort of put you in the right direction in terms of answering that a little bit?
It is a bit of a scope, isn't it?
There's a lot of answers to your question.
It is a loaded question, and I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's good.
Sorry for that.
It's a very question, and it's like I said earlier when I brought up, for example, how people look at being in a movie theater. I mean, there's more to that. There's when do you open a wrapper in a movie theater? There's some people who are outside of social norm, and they'll just open it during the climax. Noah's out there screaming. I forget her name, Rachel McAdams. It's not over. It's never over. And then right when they're about to kiss, you hear this a-hole in the back go opening a Skittle pack outside of social norm, right? That's a very basic, funny example we can use. You can apply that to anything. How often you text, what do you say, how long are you text, what type of topics are you talking about, what questions are you asking somebody? Are you asking them over and over again to tell you that they're never going to leave you? That's outside of social norm. You see them.
Yes, that's also self-validation thing that needs to happen. Your identity needs to, needs to
and that
be
perfectly ties
first.
that ties it together very nicely, by the way. I'm glad you brought up that self-validation there. I was actually going to mention that after Greenberg got off, and say, like, look, validation is a huge part of this as well. Validation is also it's a reason why relationships don't work many times. It's a reason why we push people away many times. It's also a reason why relationships can work if you get the validation under control.
Yeah,
we
exactly.
they don't understand exactly the pain that we suffer. Okay, they don't get it, and they're not going to get that part. So that I say that a lot because I want to drive home the idea that there are things that you can't get out of your partner. You want them, but you can't get them. They're impossible.
Mm,
It's like wishing that it would rain gold. It's never going
yeah.
to rain gold. It's never going to rain gold. You could sit there and pray to the gold gods all day outside. No gold will fall from the sky. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And as Karma said, attachment styles play a huge aspect in this as well. That's very true as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a love language thing almost. It's
Yeah.
of different type of paradigms that people choose or become or naturally are, right? Depending upon what we're talking about here, and whether or not we're compatible. And there's ways to make people see differently and change their compatibility ratio in a relationship. There are ways to work that out. I do it all the time. I used to be a relationship coach before I was a BPD coach, and I've saved hundreds and hundreds of relationships that looked like they weren't going to work at all at the start
Oh,
from
wow.
the outside perspective. And it all comes down to a willingness to change on both sides, desire on both sides. You both have to want it to work. You both have to be willing to play ball and change some stuff. And then we got to work on our perspectives and figuring out where we can close all these gaps. Where are you different from each other? That's the question. And
Yeah.
how can we make it more similar? Does that make sense to
Mm.
you?
Yeah, that does. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. No problem. It's always a delight to see you. And thank you so much for everything that you contribute to the community. I see you always commenting. You're super bubbly, super supportive. I'm sure that, like me, everybody else is looking for you every morning. Well, it's every evening, right?
Yeah, that's
So
yeah, it's all
weird.
times hours. All
I mean,
parts hours, yeah.
it makes sense to me that the world spins. Like you don't have sun right now, and I do. That part makes sense to me. The part that doesn't make sense to me is that you're actually about to be in tomorrow. I don't like that
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, we're in the
So
future.
nah, that doesn't add
I
up to
can
me
tell you
exactly.
exactly I can tell you exactly what happens.
Okay. Well, what is my future for today? Do you know?
You are going to have a fabulous day,
Oh yeah.
and yeah, yep, and you're going to save a lot of people.
Thank you so much. That's the mission. I guess we're on track, right?
We are, yep.
Wow. Do
One
you have
by
any other
one.
questions or any other comments
Um,
that you'd like to throw out there?
oh, I've got a lot. I've got a whole list for our session.
Well, if you
But
want to pick anything else, feel free to. If you have anything to say to the community, you're always welcome.
oh, thank you. Yeah, it's always great to be part of feeling like you belong, part of a community, feeling accepted. And it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean that, you need validation from us, because honestly, you do that by yourself by rocking up to these lives.
Well said.
You're on the way. And both Kevin and Dave is so amazing.
Thank you.
What you've done, like, I've only been working with Kevin now for, how long has it been? A week?
It feels like a week. Time sort of flies for me, but it all sorts of blends together a little bit. We talk a lot. It's
We
hard,
do.
it's hard to say
Yeah.
exactly the start date without looking at it, but it's
Yeah. Well,
rather
we've been working
recently.
together for less than a week, I think it is. The modules are just so easy to understand, great content, and you just, it's good to know that you've actually been through it, rather than speaking to someone like a doctor or a psychologist, something
Sure.
who hasn't been through it. They just go, oh yeah, we'll just put you in DBT. And there's reasons for DBT, but
Sure.
we're not going to go into that.
Yeah. That's a whole rabbit hole, right? That's a
Yeah,
deep
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
deep one. I like the
yeah.
name change, by the way. That's great.
Oh,
Yep.
thank you. Yeah, and I changed my profile picture because everyone was saying, oh, it's SpongeBob. SpongeBob's got BPD.
That's true. Yeah, I like that change too. That's great. Assuming your identity, right?
Yes, that's right.
That's exactly what's happening in real time. That's
Getting
amazing to
there.
watch. That's amazing to watch. No
Thanks for
problem.
coming across that bridge with me.
No problem at all. It's been a true pleasure, and it's like I told you yesterday. I've been across this bridge many times. It's not a big no. That the when you make changes throughout the program, you see something work for the first time. It's easier to move faster. So you will snowball of improving. You'll make that first change that was really hard to do. And then you'll say,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, I made a different decision and it actually benefited me. I got rewarded for that different decision. And the next time I'm like, okay, jump. This is the next time to jump. You'll just do it right away because you're like, well, I want that reward for right, and things move very quickly as you start to see that it works. So it does take trust. You do have to trust me when I say that you're not going to fall right through the floorboards on that bridge and go crashing down into the wall.
I don't doubt you for a minute.
Oh, thank you so much. I don't doubt you for a minute either. You got
Oh,
this.
thank you.
Easy peasy. I totally believe in you. Always have from day one. We're going to get there, and it's going to happen relatively quickly. Mark my words.
Thank you. I might hop down and let somebody else come up.
Okay, well, it's a pleasure speaking to you, and I'm sure I'll be messaging you shortly here in between my sessions.
You have a fantastic day.
You too, and you have a good night.
Thank you. How do I get down?
How do I get down? Best said ever. I love that one.
Oh, this live thing's only been today, so
I got you. I'll disconnect you.
I
Nice.
think. All right, bye.
Bye. Okay, so we have a few more minutes if anybody else wants to hop on, say anything, talk at all. Anybody is welcome who wants to jump on. Just let David know. He is a moderator and he's also a sensitive disability coach. And he's become my best friend. So he's a great guy and he'll make sure you're heard and seen. Just message him in the comment box there. Looks like peace sign. I'm going to call you peace sign. How are people diagnosed? So you would have to go to a mental health professional that is licensed to diagnose. That's the simple answer. But I will say a couple words on this in the sense that a lot of people who have BPD end up with misdiagnoses, right? They end up with bipolar or PTSD diagnosis or anxiety, depression, those kinds of things. Very common for that to happen. I think it's because most mental health professionals do not understand this condition even enough to really recognize it. They don't know. There's a lot of reasons for it. We're also, I'm not going to say this to upset anybody, but we all know it's true. We're also very manipulative, right? It's a high intelligence type of mentality. We go in there and we think we know everything, and sometimes we do know everything, but we go in, we skirt around some important details. Maybe it's out of fear. We don't want them to know certain things, that kind of stuff. And they end up giving us the wrong diagnosis. So I always say it's not really about the diagnosis as much as it is about fixing the problems. So if you identify with this condition at all, even in the slightest bit, might as well jump on that. Might as well get that fixed. There's problems regardless. Like, is it BPD? That song I was singing. Anyway, who knows, right? Honestly, I want to say it like this a little bit, and I don't mean to sound weird about it. Who cares, honestly? If you feel like you fit in here, you fit in here. You don't even have to have BPD to benefit from a lot of the words that are coming out of my mouth. I truly feel that's important to understand, because people think they have to fit into a label. They have to fit into a box to be accepted. You don't have to have BPD to be accepted here, to be loved here, to fit in here, to get better, to improve your life. When you're dating, how do you identify people with BPD? Okay, fine. We'll do this one. It's just a funny concept that we would go out to date to look for people with BP. I guess that's where my mind went. I don't think that's what you meant, but I think you're just dating and you're like, I think this person might have BPD. Strong fear of abandonment, no sense of self, worried about every single thing you're doing. We oftentimes become very clingy because we rely on you for validation all throughout the day. Asking, because I married to BPD, scared to date now. What are early signs? Anger is sometimes an early sign. The first 2 years of my journey to remission, I thought I had anger issues. So I was seeing people about anger. I was going to anger management classes, all that kind of thing. BPD is borderline personality disorder. Yes, yes, indeed. And early warning signs, I would say it's a little difficult to find it early sometimes because you're caught up in that honeymoon phase too. And you might not realize that this person is going to continue to be clingy even after the honeymoon period. So that's a difficult one to detect. I would say you might look for, and here's another problem with this whole early detection thing. A lot of the SH, if you know what we can't talk about them. I got a sting. If you guys can't tell, I was stung by TikTok. I will not talk about SH ever again on this platform. I do not want to lose you. But anyway, if you see signs of SH, maybe scars, that look like they were self-induced, because they're probably not going to be doing SH in the honeymoon phase because they're happy, because they're getting all the attention from you, right? If you have heard any stories of early childhood, as Greenberg was, a lot of the times early childhood trauma can spark this condition. If you find out that one of their parents has borderline personality disorder, it's interesting that you end up with two BPD from that. Isn't that interesting? Peace sign. I say that because we tend to be attracted to the same types of people. I tend to be attracted to narcissists, for instance. Cluster B attracts cluster B. And I'm not looking at you psychoanalyzing you, but I am saying that is an interesting trend to have identified in your life. You ask it almost as if you want to avoid it, which is okay. That's okay. If that's how you feel, because some people have been beaten into the ground by this condition to the point where they don't have the energy for it anymore. But I would encourage you not to judge all BPD people the same way, not saying you're doing that by any means, because we are still independent, different people. We move at different rates. We heal at different speed. There's a lot of differences between each borderline individual. And it's, yes, drastically different, as Karma says. And yes, it's a spectrum. Very nice contributions, guys. I love how there's extra perspective in the chat. Okay, extra perspective is important here because not everybody thinks the same way. Baldwin says a lot of work on yourself helps recognize symptoms. Yeah, that's also true. If you feel like you suffer from BPD, and you start to own it more, it's easier to identify in other people. Like I know when somebody has it. I know when people have BPD traits too. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have the condition, but I know when they're like on the spectrum, so to speak, on the scale. And I believe that everybody in life is on every single scale. Sometimes they're a 0, and sometimes they're a 10, and everywhere in between, right? I think it's not so bad being attracted or with a BPD person if they are willing to get help and working on themselves. That is the criterion that I give people. They're like, is it going to work? Should I stay with him or her or they or whatever? And I say, are they willing to change? Are they willing to improve? Are they doing anything about it? And if the answer is no, have we talked about it with them? Do you think they might be willing to do something about it? Are they willing to talk to me, for example? If the answer is no, then my advice is always the same, which is move on, because you have 10 to 20 years at minimum, if not way more, depending upon what their goals are and how their awareness changes, of misery, suffering, pain, and just completely terrible memories. Don't throw away 2 decades on someone who isn't willing to change. That's important in my opinion. Now, I'm not saying that person's not worth saving, but what I am saying is, you won't be able to save them as the partner, and you will end up just being drugged through the mud right along with them. So it's a hard conversation to have, because I don't like saying it, but that whole being willing to do something about it totally matters. It totally matters, because otherwise, you as the partner, you're sacrificing dignity and self-respect to be with them, which is a problem. Okay, that is a problem. And it will affect how you feel about yourself. And as I always say, self-esteem is meant to be how you feel about you, not composed of how other people feel about us. That does not work. That's a crappy way to live life. Living life based on how other people make us feel is a mistake. And we can fall into that trap as borderline individual very easily. because we never learned how to validate ourselves. We never learned exactly who we are. We never learned the proper coping mechanisms to exist in life. Like Greenbird earlier was mentioning how, she had a family trained her to expect that there will be trauma in life and how to handle it, that kind of thing. Well, we didn't get that. It was like somebody just plucked us up and threw us in the deep end of the pool. And, it's worse than that. They didn't just say swim. They're also over there putting their foot on our head over and over again, right? That's how it feels to have BPD. It's like somebody just threw me into the deep end, and now they're also pressing me down. I get a little bit of air, and the second I can breathe again, just right back under the water, right back under the water, and over again. And if you don't do something about it, if you don't stand up and say, I'm going to make a change, I'm going to do something different here, you're just going to stay in that position for the entire rest of your life. I think it might have been yesterday. I was just telling somebody, maybe even you guys, hard to say, but my oldest client was in their 80s. Like, they were suffering still at 86 or whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, like, damn, that's a long time. If I had to deal with that trauma that long, man, that is painful. Thank you, Green. Sometimes I have my moment. The truth is, guys, intent matters. And in a relationship, if the intent is good on both sides, then you have a foundation for success. And then both people need to be willing to change things. Even the neurotypical person has to change some stuff sometimes. And if you love somebody, you'll make an effort. You'll make an effort to do it. Brookie says, "How do I break being attracted to emotionally unavailable men?" Well, have you analyzed the structure of which you find these men, or you start the romance with these men? And this is going to sound really stupid. I got a friend who's getting back out there, right? He's starting a dating profile. He sends me his profile on the site, this app, and I look at it and I'm like, we got to change some things. I was an expert at this, very, very great at this kind of thing. And the way that you present yourself to the world and who you expose yourself to plays a large role in the type of people you end up with. That is the truth. So if you have a profile on a dating app, let's say, and you are edgy, and maybe you're smoking a joint or something like that, and it's obvious, you like to party or whatever, then you're going to end up with what type of men? For example, you're going to end up with men that like that type of thing. If you have a profile that makes you look like a business person or a Christian, or there's all these different things, right? We have identity crises as BPD people, so oftentimes we struggle to figure out exactly who we are. But when you are crafting your billboard for the world, we'll call it, right? Because you're advertising yourself in a sense, you're trying to sell yourself. It matters how you put yourself out there. So that is what I would say. Increase the respect that you have for yourself, and increase the respect that you put into crafting your billboard, so to speak. And that is the answer here. So we are approaching the end of our live, but I always like to leave you guys, some favorable, positive words to start the day, or in some case, Miss Liz, we're ending your, hopefully this leads to good dreams for you, while some of us over here in America have to go grind and get through the day. That's sometimes not easy. I need you guys to understand that I know that it feels like you're alone most of the time. Okay, I understand that. But every single morning we're here. And look at how many of the same people are here. You all are starting to form relationships together, like outside of the live. And that is completely encouraged. It's acceptable. We're starting to feel more and more like a family every day, because we are. We all know each other better than the whole world knows us. And you are not alone. And there are places in the world, like here, okay, which make a huge difference. And whether or not we can satisfy ourselves, be happy, achieve our potential, we all believe in each other here. I see it every day in the comments. I will say, we just registered a Discord and we're in the work with getting that set up. I hope to be announcing that very early next week, in which case we can also hang out there. throughout the day. Myself and David, I almost literally refer to myself as my name, Kevin and David, we'll be hopping in there, okay? Talk about identity crisis, right? Perfect, man. We'll be hopping in there all throughout the day, hanging out a little bit. All of us can hang out together a little bit. It will give us yet one more resource, to one more support system, avenue for that. And I want to thank you all for your commitment here. It is you who makes this work. It's not me. It is you who makes this work. It is all of us pulling together. And I want you guys to pat yourself on the back and say, man, like, this is one place where everybody's understood, and I'm part of that. I'm contributing to that every day. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. I love you all. I'm so glad you're here. And I really want everybody to have a good day. I want you to look at the day with positive light. We often go into our day feeling rather negative, right? But why? Why be negative when you have complete control? Sorry about that. No sense in being negative when you have complete control over your future. And you do, okay? You do. What you choose and what you say, if you put it out there into the universe, it will become reality. Manifestation is real, guys, so manifest remission and start by manifesting a good day today. Thank you for being here. We'll see you tomorrow at 7 a.m. US EST. Goodbye, everybody.